believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Randes, also known as Ricky Randes, and today we got Dr. Anthony Balduzzi. What a phenomenal discussion I have for you today. And actually, today I record two podcasts. I also have a dear friend of mine from Deep Dives with Monica Perez and the Propaganda Report, Monica Perez, of course. And I recorded that also, so that should be out soon after hearing this one. The nice thing about winters and work slowing down a little bit is I can put out more episodes, focus more on the shows that I'm doing, the guests that I have on, and all that type of stuff. But of course, during the summer, because this isn't my full-time job, it's very hard to do that. But with a little help from you guys can help me reach that goal of eventually doing the show full-time. But before I remind you this is a Value for Value show, let me just tell you some of the topics we hit on today. We talk about supplements, health, nutrition, big pharma, big food, the medical industrial complex, and much more. We go down some really interesting rabbit holes too. So please get a notepad because you're definitely going to learn some stuff today. I know I did. And get ready for a very fascinating, information-dense conversation. But of course, if you want more of these shows, like I mentioned, help out by giving some value to the shows that I'm sure give you some value. And today's show, you get tons of value in regards to how to optimize your body and mind and how to get the most out of your life and maybe even deal with some health issues. So if you get some value out of this discussion or any of the almost 500 episodes I've brought to you, please consider giving some value back. It doesn't have to be financial, like I always tell you guys. The show is open source, so feel free to post it, share it anywhere you want, and that helps expose the show to new listeners and new viewers. And wherever you watch or listen to the Ripple Effect podcast, I'm sure there's a like feature, subscribe feature, or comment feature. Please do all those things so you can help the algorithms work in our favor, because most of the time they're working against us. But if you're in a good financial situation and you can't afford to support the show financially, even if it's just a little bit, please do. No amount is too little, and there's plenty of ways to financially support the show if you can. Of course, we have a Patreon page if you want to support us monthly. One of the best ways to support the show, because it's guaranteed. I can count on it every month, help pay with the bandwidth, storage, equipment, updates if need be, IT support, all that type of stuff. Support us on Patreon. As always, the links are in the show description or on my website, rippleeffectpodcast.com. Other ways of supporting the show is sending a one-time donation via Venmo or PayPal. And I've actually recently got a couple donations via Venmo and PayPal. So thank you. You guys know who you are, and you are helping motivate me and showing that there's people out there who really appreciate what I'm doing. And then also we have a merch store. If you want to support us by getting some merch, hats, t-shirts, stickers, hoodies, all that type of stuff, please browse the merch store. You can go directly to the merch store by going to the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com, or you can use a link in the show description or on my website and just look around, see if there's something you like. Everything's reasonably priced, high quality. You'll get it quickly, and it's a great way of representing a show that you enjoy and also supporting a show that you enjoy. And then, of course, we have a couple sponsors, one being Content Safe. Content Safe is how I get all my videos on all the video platforms I'm on. I upload to one location, then magically, with the help of Content Safe, that video appears on all the video platforms, Band.video, Rumble, BitChute, Rockfin, and many others. So if that seems like a service that you might need, if you're a YouTuber, streamer, podcaster, something that you might be interested in, reach out to Matt from Content Safe. Let him know you're listening to Ripple Effect Podcast, and he'll definitely take care of you. The next one is the University of Reason, created by Richard Grove. Richard Grove and the University of Reason will help you realize that you are your best investment. He will help you connect with a liberty, freedom-minded community. He will help you expand on skills, learn new skills. He'll help you get out of that everyday grind and realize you're your greatest asset. He's helped a lot of people, including Matt, who started Content Safe. So if you feel like you're at a crossroads in life, if you feel like you're a hamster on a wheel and you need to change your life, do something different, check out the University of Reason. Use the link in the show description, and hopefully you can change your life and help the Ripple Effect podcast at the same time. And then the last but not least sponsor is Element Electrolytes. It's a powder that you put in your water or you can put in your coffee. It tastes amazing, gives you the essential minerals you need to stay hydrated and optimize your body and mind and help with muscle fatigue, cramps, headaches, and many other symptoms due to dehydration. It was formulated by Rob Wolf, which we talk about on this podcast. He's an OG in the health and nutrition community. If you're fasting, if you're doing keto, this is keto and fasting friendly. It won't kick you out of ketosis, won't kick you out of your fasting state, so you get all the benefits of fasting. And even though I don't think we talk about electrolytes in general on the show, we do talk about potassium, magnesium, and sodium and other essential minerals that are super important to optimizing your body and mind and how important they are to our health. So please check out Element Electrolytes on their website. And please, if you do go to their website, use the link in the show description or on my website and check out all the science. You'll figure out why athletes use it. You'll also learn how they come up with the dosages for the amounts of electrolytes they put in there and why it's so important to get those amounts. And Rob Wolf has been on many podcasts, including Joe Rogan's. But if you want to learn a little bit more about the history and the origin story of Element Electrolytes, check out his past appearance on Ripple Effect Podcast. And you can learn a lot more about Element Electrolytes. And you'll learn a lot more also about Rob Wolf and all the amazing work that he does and much more. So that's it, guys. Enjoy this amazing, amazing conversation about health, nutrition, medicine, diet, big pharma, big food, and much more. Thanks, guys, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Peace.
My name is Dr. Anthony Balduzzi. I run two companies, the Fit Father Project and the Fit Mother Project, and specifically I help busy moms and dads over the age of 40 get back into fantastic shape, create habits that will give them health for a lifetime, and be a great example for their kids and help their kids live healthier too. As you can imagine, growing up, this wasn't like my designed career path. You know, I was a young kid, as I mentioned, grew up in Syracuse, New York, and I loved being outside playing with my little brother. What was unique about my childhood, though, is I watched my own dad and his health deteriorate. Like many people, he was just busting his butt to put food on the table. He was highly stressed, wasn't taking care of himself in necessarily like all the ways that he could. And one day he fell over and he had a seizure, and we took him to the hospital, and the doctors found out he had a brain tumor. And this was probably in his late 30s when he got diagnosed with that. And I saw him for the next 6-7 years, like go through all of the cancer treatment, you know, chemotherapy, brain surgery, radiation, and he eventually got so sick that he died when he was 42 years old. And so I watched that happen, you know, in my childhood. I watched the man that I looked up to the most, my dad, you know, basically deteriorate, wither away, and die. And he died right before my 10th birthday. So I was 9 at the time. And then I watched my mom scramble with all the stress to provide for 2 kids and you know, to be both a mom and a dad, and how much her health was like being taxed as a byproduct of that. And I realized so fundamentally at a young age from this tragedy that like health is so important. It's the foundation of everything we love as parents. If we don't have our health, you know, it doesn't matter how much we want to provide, protect, enjoy with our families, like it's just going to kind of crumble. It's this bedrock experience. And I found as I was going through the grieving of my dad's death, my mom gave me a pair of my dad's dumbbells, and I would hide them under my bed and pull them out at night and start to exercise. And as I did, I realized that I was transforming. Not just physically, I was getting stronger, but also mentally and emotionally, I started to heal, because I realized that I could take all that pain I felt in my heart and I can constructively direct it with my will to create something positive out of it. So I started to build up my body, and I got a lot stronger, and I developed this massive passion for health and fitness that has echoed on for the next several decades of my life. And I don't want to go too deep into, I guess, my academic school time, but, you know, I spent 20 years in fitness, health, and medicine. You know, went to an Ivy League university, you know, competed in bodybuilding for over 10 years, and did fairly well at that. Went to naturopathic medical school to really figure out what's the holistic way to treat people beyond just like the drugs and the chemo and the band-aid medicine that you see out there in the world right now. And along the way, I started these companies, Fit Father and Fit Mother, to basically distill down everything I'd learned about creating sustainable habits with nutrition, the right way to exercise after age 40, how to create a healthy structure in families and homes. And I created these programs that have since been used by close to 100,000 families in over 100 countries. So that's basically the work that I do with my team. Is we have this amazing online program community for Fit Father and Fit Mother. We welcome people in. We help them get their eating on point. We help them move their bodies and exercise more, roll with the different rhythms and seasons of life that happen, whether that's seasonal changes with wintertime, holidays, or just navigating stuff that comes up in life. And we keep everyone accountable and on track. And I love seeing people transform. So that's the short of the life story.
That's one of the reasons why I wanted you on the show, because these are topics that I find incredibly important. I agree with you 110% in regards to the mind and body being connected. A lot of times, I'm 38, and a lot of times people think, well, I started working out in my teens because similar reasons, like I wanted to build my confidence, I wanted to feel better physically and look better physically. And as time went by, and especially as I got older, I realized like, oh, I'm continuing this whole process of going to the gym every morning. I mean, I went this morning, even though we got some snow. Like I still got to get my workout in. And just because of my mental health, I'm just a better person. I tell my wife this all the time. Like, you don't understand. Like, it's not like sometimes she'll be like, well, if you miss a day, what's the big deal? I'm like, it's not a big deal, but I just know that I'm a better father, a better husband, a better friend, a better, employee. I'm a better, whatever, wherever I am, workplace, around my family, friends, if I'm playing sports, whatever I'm doing, I'm like, I'm a better person if I got that workout in, just mentally and physically. And there's a guy, Dr. Sorno, who wrote Mind Over Back Pain. I had somebody who, was good friends with his on, but I actually didn't know that until he came on the show. I forget what the doctor's name was, but I was a big fan of his work because he was his back surgeon, one of the leading back surgeons in the US. And he was finding that like he was looking at these x-rays and MRIs, and he's like, there's no consistency here. He's like, there's people who have really messed up bodies and backs and saying that they have very little pain, and then people who have doesn't look like very messed up backs and they're saying they have a lot of pain. And then he's like, there must be something that I'm missing here. And then he started asking questions and finding out that a lot of these people who are having more pain, it wasn't physical, it was mental or emotional. They were having
they had trauma work, basically, is what he figured out, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that amazing? Like, I mean, we have these bodies that are these vehicles through life, and they're so much more than just these little meat suits that we think, like these biomechanical beings. It's our nervous system, which is interfacing with our thoughts and our feelings, which can literally be trapped in the form of memory or muscular tension that we have. And these patterns show up when we get triggered. And I think I hear a lot for busy parents, particularly people who are, close to 40 or over 40, like they often say, oh, I don't have the time to exercise or take care of my health. And like that mindset is rooted in this completely false premise that your body vehicle is different than the rest of your life, that this is not the expression unit through which you have all experiences. It's like, if you don't take care of this and this thing is becoming inflamed, sluggish, you're not feeling good in your own skin, that's going to color and affect every single aspect of your experience. Like, we know we have a great day when we, eat healthy foods, when the sun is shining, when we're exercising, we're changing our neurochemistry. It's like, so if we start to invest in this vehicle, it's great and it's hilarious. People take better care of their cars and their homes and their kitchens than they do of their bodies in some sense. And it just really goes to show how much we don't recognize, because it's literally like staring us right here. Like, it's just almost like so close that it becomes something that we miss. And we have these weird mental things where we say, I don't have the time. And that fundamental premise is not true. Like, this is your life. This is your body. Like, let's take care of it. It doesn't have to be super extreme, but you got to have the mindset of investing in it every day.
Yeah, I tell listeners all the time that some of my most important shows, and I've had like NSA whistleblowers, I've had all types of crazy guests on the show, but some of my favorite and most important shows are the health ones, because no matter what you're doing in life, like whatever your job is, your passion is, whatever you enjoy, you'll enjoy it more if physically and mentally you're in a better place, you're healthier. And the car metaphor is a perfect example. I used to say that all the time. I'm like, I would see people in like a AMG, G-Wagon at the McDonald's drive-thru. And I'm just saying
Right.
that Mercedes requires like synthetic oil, the best,
Yeah.
product in the world, and then you're putting the cheapest products in your body. And the
Right.
part is, if that car starts falling apart, you can trade it in. You can't trade in your body. And so I always
Right.
tell people, I'm like, you have to look at your body as like you were given one car, and
Hmm.
that's the only car you'll ever have. So if it starts falling apart, you're going to be just, on three wheels, trying to drive to work. It won't start. It's going to, not start in the cold. Everything's going to sound like it hurts and squeak. So it's like, if you look at it as like, okay, if I'm only going to get one car, what would I do? I would change the oil on time. I would make sure that I put the best gas in it. I would take care of it. And that's the way we should look at our bodies. Unfortunately, we don't.
Yeah, I think we have this like weird short-term bias of the mind where we're really good at responding to like immediate threats, but we don't recognize like the impact of our decisions today that echo out decades into the future. Like literally the fries in the McDonald's that you eat this week are going to affect you tremendously when you're 70 because it's laying down that inflammation in your arteries. It's going to lead to heart disease and medications and the side effects that come from that kind of stuff. So it's like we need to kind of future cast and understand the real significance of our daily actions with our body because it's massive. Like right now, like let's just say the average life expectancy in the USA is around 75 years old, but most people are in pretty rough shape from 60 on. Like the last 15 years are just kind of like vegging out, memories declining, don't have as much mobility, just kind of like keeping on doing the basics. Like, but yet we also know there's people that live into their 90s and are still like water skiing and doing stuff. Like they went from 60 to 90 and like they crushed it. That's 3 decades of life. Like you and me being in our, our 30s, right? Holy crap. Like what would that be like to live a whole nother life on the back end of that when you have a deeper family, more wisdom, ideally more resources? Like there's just so much experience that you could have if you tend to your body. And then also let's kind of get real here. Like right now, society is set up in such a way that there's so many pressures that are keeping people like fat, addicted, lazy, lethargic. Like the food today is truly poison. Like that's one of the fascinating things about food versus exercise. Like exercise is good for you because you do it and you feel better, and it's good to build muscle. It helps your metabolism. But even if you did not exercise, but you ate the right foods, you could be very healthy. Like there are people who are the centenarians that live to 100 a lot around in these communities around the world. They're not doing P90X. They walk, they garden, they eat natural foods, they have good relationships, they sleep, they have a prayer or spiritual practice. So my point is like we don't realize that food can either be the most nourishing thing or truly poisonous. And most of the food today, especially the food we feed our kids, is basically poisonous for the body in terms of blood sugar dysregulation, creating inflammation, aggravating the immune system. And when you aggravate the immune system, you either get autoimmune conditions. Those are rising like thousands of percent. Look at every TV commercial, for any like predominantly female show on today, like let's just say like The Bachelor, Bachelorette, soap operas, like every commercial is some kind of autoimmune drug. It's like the autoimmune experience of women today is out of control because we're dysregulating our immune systems through poor GI tract health, through like fake foods, pesticides, a whole bunch of crap. So food can be, you got to start viewing food in that lens. Yes, there's a taste dimension, but that's got to start to be secondary. And healthy food can taste good, but you just got to really understand that you're either poisoning yourself or enhancing your health with literally what you put in your mouth on a daily basis.
Yeah, Dr. Chris Kresher, he
Mm-hmm.
had a good metaphor where he talked about how you don't go from like healthy to sick overnight. Like you were saying, it's small life choices that eventually add up, add up, add up, and all of a sudden, one day you're sick and you're like, what the hell happened? I was healthy yesterday. It's like, no, but you made a lot of poor decisions, and like you said, everything you're eating is either hurting you or helping you.
Yes.
I'm a gym rat. I talk to ton. I mean, I'm 38. I've been going to the gym. I probably can count on one hand how many weeks I've missed the gym, but I just love going. Even if I get a crappy workout, I like going. I just feel better. Even if I'm sore, I like going. But I've had so many conversations with people, and I would tell people, I'm like, listen, like your diet is equally, if not more important than your workout. If
Yeah.
you didn't work out at all, but you ate well, you would feel better and you would
Yeah.
look better. But if
Yeah.
you feel like crap and you work out like crazy, guess what? You're still going to look like crap and you're still going to feel like crap. Like you said,
Yes.
you're causing inflammation. You're causing, all these things. You're not getting any nutritional value out of your food.
Yes.
So that's something. There's a app that somebody just recommended to me. Yuka.
Okay.
Uh, it's like YUKA, and you can scan food or drinks or whatever, and it'll tell you all the chemicals in it, pesticides.
Mm-hmm.
Like it gives you all this breakdown of what's in it. And Initially I'm like, well, I try to eat things I can pick,
Yes.
I can kill. So I'm like, I don't have ingredients on the stuff I usually consume anyways, so it's not useful. But then I'm like, for my kids, for their snacks, I'm like, maybe this
Yep.
is a good way of getting them to like understand, like, this is what you're putting in your body. It's not just when you're eating goldfish, it's not just fake cheddar cheese. It's a bunch of chemicals. It's
For
everything's
sure.
artificial, and it's supposed to just trick your brain into believing that it's cheese, but there's nothing cheese about it,
Yes.
and that's the like the average American diet is like it's snacks, and it's also something like being a European, and like eating was a huge part of my upbringing. It would
Yeah.
be like if I got a F on my report card, my parents would get a little mad. But if I missed dinner, that's like one thing I never did. Like I knew I was gonna get it if I was late to dinner. Like dinner was a sacred moment where we would appreciate and enjoy and really not take for granted the work that my mother put into to putting together this beautiful dinner, and all the ingredients and everything. It's like it was made. So when it was actually made from scratch, it takes work, and when it takes work,
Yeah.
you can appreciate that, and everything
Yes.
better. And so I feel like that's a little bit of our issue too in America.
For
Would you
sure.
agree with that?
Completely. Yeah. And I think it's like, and let's talk about how completely entrained that is. Well, one, as fundamental as we can kind of have an idea of looking back into history, like humans have gathered around food, fire for warmth. We cook food. We transfer food to one another. It's nourishment. It's love. It's culture. Like every culture, we say, oh, I'm going to visit a country. What's the food like? So it's obviously a huge connected thing, which also brings along the love, the social connection, and just the slowing down time together. And then here in the West, our culture is fast, busy, nonstop, high pace. And now we're also filling that time with distractions and low impact activities that make us feel busy, but don't actually do stuff for our lives. And then food, yeah, we lose this whole aspect of the connection, the real foods, the real time, the real moments. And we're just, and this, why I think it's so systemic is, okay, so we have parents who need to work crazy jobs or double jobs to pay for their kids or to pay off debts. And then they have to go get fast, convenient foods because that's what they can kind of afford and the family can get because everyone's binging around. That stuff is literally making everyone more sick and not as healthy. And then we have these phones that we're doing to escape because we're not feeling good. So we're getting more distracted and disconnected by getting these little neurotransmitter hits. And then we wake up and we repeat the cycle over and over. So it's like the systemic pressures of culture are interfacing with the availability of food and the affordability, our busyness, our stress levels, and it's all one thing. So like that's why it's actually so hard for people to untangle it. It's not as simple as like everyone knows what healthier foods are. Everyone knows they should exercise. Everyone knows they should sleep more, drink more water. But like untangling that ball for your family uniquely requires some strategy, pulling the right kinds of strings, creating the right environment because the you can almost think of it as like the magnetic field of the culture is so strong and keeping you really tangled up, and that's why most people don't get untangled until things get really bad, and then you have someone in the family gets super sick, or there's something really scary that might be enough motivation that moment to finally like, okay, make this a massive priority. But we don't have to wait. And then one final thing is, I'm sure you have comments on that, is I want to talk about kids too, because as parents, like literally our kids have genetics that we pass to them, but really like the environment that we're helping them create in their bodies is going to be like the epigenetic expression of their potential. And the food and the inputs with technology, their sleep, if they're getting outside and getting sunshine, is literally the soil through which they're able to express and become the greatest version of themselves. Overweight kids are experiencing glucose dysregulation, inflammation. It's literally making them dumber than they could be, less confident, less mobile. The fat cells that they build up in youth are literally containers they take with them for the rest of their lives, making it harder for them to keep the weight off. And so it's like it's a deep thing. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping parents, because we can get ahead of the next generation if we get serious about this now.
Well, it's funny because I remember hearing somebody say that's in it, and I'm like, wow, that's so true. They're like, why is there a kids menu? Like, why aren't kids just eating what the adults are eating? Like, if the adults are eating real food, shouldn't the kids get used to eating real food instead of just saying, hey, let's just have a menu just for a bunch of deep fried crap
Yeah.
and give it to the kids? And it's true. Like at a young age, you end up just normalizing like this is what you guys eat, this is what we eat, and then what happens? It's really hard to kind of break that cycle. But so a friend of the show and actually one of the few sponsors I was okay with having on the show was Rob Wolf from
Hmm.
Element Electrolytes and the Paleo guy and all that.
Yeah,
He's been on the show a bunch um and he's a great guy and he's not afraid of going down that rabbit hole of like this is a well orchestrated plan. This
hmm,
idea of demonizing real food. He talks about meatless Mondays in New York
for
and
sure.
where you're from and how like what you're doing is like slowly planting this seed that like these foods are bad for you and eventually just like everything it seems like in the world like they're trying to control all industries and foods like the next big industry that it's like if we can get people to start eating just completely fake food then you can control that, you can patent it, you can profit from it, and you can also control it. Do you think there's anything to that?
For sure. I mean, there's in every, like, civilization is built upon directing and controlling people. At least our current like expression of what civilization is. We've always been trying to do that. Governments trying to, get money through taxes and keep order in that sense. The pharmaceutical industry is a massive, massive player, right? This is like maybe trillions of dollars, but let's just say multi-billion dollar industry that is now, basically profiting from creating medications to solve diseases that only exist because we're eating the wrong kinds of foods. Like cancer cases in people under 50 have raised 50% in the last 2 to 3 decades. Do you think that's just by accident? Is it just like humans are starting to get cancer more by accident? Absolutely not. It's because we're exposed to so many of these environmental toxins. We're exposed to fake foods. Our immune systems are dysregulated. So there's a system that is profiting from problems that are created kind of systemically. Now, how top down that control basically gets. Well, I mean, and certainly as populations are growing, and now we have the interface with climate and people are villainizing CO2, like CO2 is the problem with climate change. And we can get into that. Not I'm any expert on that, but I'm happy to share my 2 cents. And then we have the idea of like, the foods and the fake foods that we can patent, like, yeah, someone's making a buck. Someone's looking to control more people. And the cool thing is like the stuff that's actually healthy for you is exactly what you said. It's like non-processed. So these are going to be meats, fruits, vegetables, like the stuff in the perimeter of the grocery store that's ideally seasonally available. And so that can't be patented. That's the stuff that humans have been surviving on and thriving on for thousands of years. It doesn't have any of the additives. And yeah, it's a deep game, right? I mean, it's a deep game, but yeah, I think there is a high level of control and directing of this whole game for sure.
Well, the thing is, and I've told the story 100 times on the show, but I hopefully listeners bear with me. Anybody who hasn't heard it, but I had Jim Abrams on the show. He was the filmmaker of The Naked Gun, some of my favorite movies growing up. Still, if I have younger listeners listening, check out Naked Gun if you just want like a slapstick, hilarious show to kind of cheer you up after this depressing podcast about how screwed we are. Go check out Naked Gun. But he had a son who had these really violent seizures. He went to every doctor in the world. He just had all the he had connections to go see all the best experts, greatest minds. Nobody could resolve this issue. Found by himself found this research from John Hopkins that they were curing these type of seizures with the ketogenic diet.
Hmm.
And no doctor gave him this advice. No doctor recommended it. He started the Charlie Foundation because of his anger towards like years of his son struggling and the family struggling. And not once did somebody even suggest this. I had a similar issue with like a friend of mine who was diagnosed with cancer in his late 20s. And I'm like, hey, you should really look into a podcast I did with Dr. Thomas Seyfried,
Hmm.
who wrote Cancer as a Metabolic Disease. And actually, I was exposed to his work by Dr. Dominic D'Agostino, who's been on a few times. And and I'm just like, because my buddy has like a massive sweet tooth. And I'm like, it can't be good that you have a
For
massive
sure.
sweet tooth and you were diagnosed with cancer. I'm like, maybe. And then so he brings it up. I'm like, just bring him to your doctor. I'm like, I'm just curious what he'll say. And he's like, oh, I wouldn't worry about it, but I would worry about the red meat. And I'm like, what
Yeah.
can you next time you see him, can you just ask him like what research or what study is molding this perspective that like even though we know glucose is an energy source for cancer cells, like he's not concerned about that at all, but he's worried about red meat. And then I think he did end up sending me a study, and it was something that was pretty sketchy. Not really, it was like some little it's funny how you can take some little correlation and you can find any outcome you want, and that's what they do. And but sugar. Dr. Robert Lustig, who another one who's been on the show, like sugar has been one of those things that has gotten a pass throughout all these health
For
issues,
sure.
increases in health issues, and they've demonized fats and cholesterols and
Hmm.
all this stuff and completely made you forget about sugar. And that's why I love Dr. Lusting's work. And what's your opinion on like the food industry and their role? Because we're in similar ages too. That means that we also grew up with that ridiculous food pyramid that told you
Yep.
to eat breads and grains, and like that was the. I mean, you're literally creating long-term health issues with people, which will eventually get you on the medications to deal
Sure.
with things, which will lead you to. That's why I always say, I'm like, why is the discussion always about how can we better afford healthcare? And instead of being like, hey, instead of us figuring out how can I afford all these prescription drugs, how about we figure out how we get people off all these prescription drugs? Like,
Yes.
you shouldn't need to, to be in all this debt because of, chronic illnesses and all
For
this
sure.
stuff. We can just get to the root cause of the issue. But that's really the problem with, all this is that we look at health as like, it's a symptom management issue instead of getting to the root cause.
Totally agree with you. I want to comment on a number of those things. And actually, I think like where this is no longer a just purely depressing conversation is that these industries are propped up by consumer demand. And consumer demand is shaped by our awareness of what is good for us. We have grown up in a series of decades where we did believe that the low fat, high carb, it actually kind of started with like some of the Dr. Kellogg's kind of stuff when we started to introduce like the breakfast cereals and the grains. We villainized saturated fat, unfortunately, and that's starting to come to light that that was a bad idea. And we kind of switched from the more like meat, butter, dairy kind of, eggs kind of scenario to like the high carb, low fat experience. We used improper blood testing with just like looking at LDL cholesterol in a very like narrow window, not understanding the different types of LDL, the small dense LDL, which is the bad type versus large fluffy, looking at ApoB and some other deeper markers. So I mean, it's just been a shitstorm of I think some good and well intentioned, but unfortunately like misguided scientists, and then obviously industry looking to profit. Wheat is a food, for example, that kind of like was part of the emergence of civilization through like Mesopotamia. Like we had wheat, but the wheat that they ate thousands and thousands of years ago looks nothing like the wheat that we have today. That is hybridized, different genetics, sprayed with glyphosate, which is a ravaging pesticide that damages the body in multiple levels. So it's like that's where it's like even confusing on that thing, like whether or not you should eat grains. Like many people have this experience where they go to Europe, they eat different kinds of wheat that's not sprayed with the same kind of shit as the US. They can tolerate it fine, but they come here and they get inflamed when they have US based wheat. So there's just like a lot there, is what I'll say. But yeah, we have an industry that's profiting off of like sugar addicted people. And I think sugar dysregulation is going to be at the basis of almost all chronic disease. So when we eat too much sugar, as your listeners probably know, like blood sugar levels rise. Your body responds by secreting a lot of insulin, this hormone that shuttles sugar into cells. Over time, the pancreas that secretes the insulin gets tired and your cells become resistant to it because insulin is like floating around all the time because your blood sugar is always high because you're eating sugary foods frequently. And the problem with that is when you become insulin resistant, insulin floats around for a long time. Insulin suppresses fat burning. So when it's there, your body's in storage mode. When that sugar is in your blood, it basically makes your blood like you'd imagine like effectively sticky, and that inflammatory blood we can measure it as HbA1c, where this basically glucose stuck to these blood cell carriers creates inflammation in the arteries in the vessels, which we lay down plaques in response to that. So that's the whole. Cholesterol is actually kind of used as a band-aid to protect inflammation in vessels, and largely a lot of that inflammation is driven by high sugar levels. When sugar's in the brain, it lays down like plaques. That's why we think this new dementia, Alzheimer's explosion we have might be like now type 3 diabetes, like diabetes of the brain. And these are just to get people addicted, consumerism, like hyper palatable foods. And like kids are the ones that are most addicted to sugar, right? Like what do kids start their day off with? Juice, breakfast cereal, like with sugar in it. And then they have like sugar as snacks in school. So like we're honestly on this roller coaster constantly of all this crap. We don't have a society that's trying to keep us healthy. It's just what it comes down to. We're in a society that's trying to keep people buying things and keeping the industrial wheel moving on. And if we did want to be healthy, we would have nutrition education courses in public school in the United States. There are other countries who do this well, like Japan. They do it incredibly well. They have like really nutritious lunches. They teach kids about nutrition and like they add the cultural component to it as well. So the U.S. is a mess right now in terms of the big agriculture business, which all of them have their own agenda, right? The people growing soy and corn want to sell more soy and corn. The people in the beef, egg, and dairy industries want to sell more of their own products. And then you have influencers who have experienced results in very specific ways that work for them. We're screaming about plant-based, we're screaming about carnivore, we're screaming about this. So it's now honestly just all the confusion around the landscape makes it really hard for any given consumer to navigate these things. It's tough.
Yeah, but one thing that I tell people as a tip, because again, I do like a ketovore diet where it's
Mm-hmm.
mostly meat, but I'll do a little bit of salad and veggies on the side. But one thing they all have in common, all the diets that typically work, at least for the most part, is they cut out all the preservatives. They cut out all the
Mm-hmm.
processed foods. They cut out all that.
Sure.
So it's like, instead of all these people who are into these diets fighting amongst each other, it's like, how about we just focus on like the most important part? Like the average person consumes a lot of chemicals and very little food, and
Yes.
if we can get people to actually eat real food, like you're gonna see improvements. And then like you said, like it varies from, it seems like it varies from like person to person. Would you agree with that? Like based on your background, maybe how your gut has adapted
Yes,
eating certain foods, all that type of stuff.
for sure. And it does vary to a certain extent person by person, but by and large, the foods that are going to be good for most people, I think there's like a 90% overlap. Like there's just like the healthy non-processed foods that you're eating are quite good. So let's get very practical for a moment. Like whether or not you choose to fast or have breakfast, like good breakfast foods for most people, and this might not be everyone, but most people are eggs, avocados, meats, certain low sugar fruits, some fermented stuff like cabbage, kimchi. So like, what does this actually look like? I mean, any kind of like egg recipe, and if you can get like high quality eggs, absolutely health benefits to those, very much so. You go plant based and make some kind of like protein smoothie. Like doesn't have to have a lot of sugar. There's a lot of good plant based stuff you could do there, like plant based protein powder, organic almond milk, hemp seeds, chia seeds. Some kind of like cacao or something like that. Like that would also be a good like low processed, high nutrient dense breakfast. For lunches and these kinds of things, it's going to be typically like, a protein forward. So some kind of protein that you enjoy with a side of vegetables. And like what we figured out from the carnivore thing is like, you don't actually have to have the like vegetables strictly in every given meal. That being said, I still think there is benefits to the gut microbiome to having certain of these plant-based fibers. And there's a lot of plant-based foods that aren't inflammatory for people, but like it could be protein bowls. If you can tolerate wheat, and this is like something from my experience, like I've literally helped coach over 100,000 people through our programs. A lot of them are eating like organic sprouted wheat that is like lower in the anti-nutrients. They feel fine doing it, like an Ezekiel bread, an organic sourdough, einkorn bread. Some people can tolerate those just fine. So you could literally have like a salad or a sandwich for lunch. In terms of snacks, you just want to eat non-processed stuff. These could be certain kinds of nuts that are low in anti-nutrients. Like the best ones are certainly going to be like macadamia nuts, pistachios, walnuts. You could have some kind of jerky or some kind of meat as a snack. You could do a protein shake if it's a high quality protein powder that's not full of crap. For dinner, again, it's kind of like protein and maybe a little side of vegetables. Basically, like your given meals would be really wonderful. And then you got to figure out which kind of carbohydrate containing foods like work well with your body. Like some people find they feel bloated and crappy after they have rice, but maybe they can have some sweet potato. Maybe your family does like pasta, but you find that like can't tolerate wheat pasta well, but you can do okay if you have like a lentil or a chickpea pasta. So it's like there's a degree of experimentation that can work and also can make it practical to work for you and your family. But it's basically all the non-processed stuff. And I think it is good as you're getting healthy to lower your carbs substantially to restore that good blood sugar balance, to make yourself more insulin sensitive. And then as you get further along your journey, you can introduce some carbohydrates back. Like very few people are going to be less healthy from including wild blueberries in their diet. Like there'd be a real reason for that to not be the case. But I guess like I think keto is a really good thing because it gets people off of the crap sugars. I do think it's most healthy for the body to be metabolically flexible, meaning we're moving in and out of different forms of metabolism, meaning sometimes we're burning fat, producing ketones, and we're in a very low carbohydrate state. Other times the body has the ability to use some glucose as it comes in, but it's through a very clean source, especially if you're doing high intensity glycolytic exercise. Like the carbohydrates are beneficial for that in many cases, not necessary, but helpful. So, I mean, it's a long discussion, but I'll pause there.
Yeah, that's another question I was going to ask you because there is a lot of conflicting opinions on if you play sports, is it necessary? I eat once a day, and I eat usually at the very end of the night and with a glass of wine, and I'm ready to like wind down. But during the day, I like to be high energy. I'm constantly like drinking coffee or pre-workout before the gym or pre-workout before I go play basketball or soccer. And but I've been curious because I've been doing this diet for so long, and you would hear all these conflicting opinions. And I had I forget what his name was. He was a doctor. He Australian doctor who worked for Liverpool Football Club. He worked for a couple other professional athletes and teams. And he tends to think that, I agree with him to some extent, but then I've heard conflicting opinions on if you're doing a really explosive sport where it requires a lot of your body. Maybe having zero carbs or sugar in your system could hurt you in regards to like having that little extra boost of energy at the end or being able to get past that fatigueness. What's your opinion? Have you seen athletes do a full ketogenic diet or carnivore diet and excel with those diets, or have they struggled and have to introduce some type of other food sources to kind of help at least when they're training?
Okay, well, I mean, let's get into this. I think it's not just like opinion. There's like a physiologic basis. We have basically four energy pathways we're tapping into when we're doing exercise, and it kind of comes down to the duration and intensity of it. So we have the creatine phosphate pathway, which is like a very explosive, like you're doing exercise under 45 seconds. Your body can use creatine phosphate to produce ATP. And this is like you're a power lifter or you're doing an all out sprint for 45 seconds. You do not need carbohydrates to execute that activity. Now we have also low intensity exercise, very much where we're still in an aerobic zone, meaning our mitochondria can still have access to enough oxygen based on the muscular demands that we can burn fat for fuel and produce a lot of ATP. And we can do that. So it's like you and I are going on a light jog or we're going on a hike. You can still like breathe and talk at the same time. Your heart rate is typically going to be under 130 beats per minute for most people. Like that only requires fat. Like you do not need carbohydrates for that kind of metabolism. It's called beta oxidation. The mitochondria are literally breaking down fats for that. So for someone who's doing like jogging, endurance racing, there's even some ultra marathon athletes now that are going completely keto. Like they're running 100 miles without any carbohydrates because their body is in an aerobic beta oxidation. Now, as you get higher in intensity, so you're increasing the demands on the muscle, it needs to produce more ATP. And as a byproduct, the energy systems are being taxed and you're starting to produce a little more lactate, which is the byproduct, like a fermentation byproduct in the muscular system from, basically being not having enough oxygen. So different metabolism routes need to be done. These are where you can use glucose. We have aerobic and anaerobic glycolysis is basically what happens here. And those are carbohydrate dependent pathways. So if you're someone who's doing like rowing, like all out rowing, like Olympic rowers, like they're going for like 5 minutes, like at a high clip, like that is going to benefit from having carbohydrates in there. Someone who is playing soccer, for example, for an extended bout, like that is going to benefit because they're going to be tapping into some of these glycolytic pathways. And just intentionally not giving your body carbohydrates for like, I don't know, there's not like a great reason necessarily because you want to see ketones are constantly on your urine dipstick, like is going to be at the taxation of performance. So your muscles naturally store carbohydrate in the form of glycogen. Like this is how the system is designed. We store carbohydrates and the body can store average person around 600 grams of carbs throughout the body. When we have a low carbohydrate diet, we are tapping into those glycogen stores. We're not going to have nearly as much. And one of the benefits of glycogen is when we store it in the muscles, it actually draws water into the muscles. It volumizes the muscles. From an aesthetic standpoint, that makes you look bigger. That's why all bodybuilders, before they go on stage, they carb up because they're getting carbohydrates into the muscle. It's drawing in some water as well. And you have that more full look because you have the glycogen in there. And there's certain sports where that can really benefit performance. Now, if you're a casual, more recreational, like playing some basketball, and you're eating one meal a day and you want to keep it like mostly low carb, and that's fine. If you're an elite athlete looking to maximize your performance and you're doing a higher intensity activity that, like soccer, like I completely agree with the Liverpool coach on that opinion, and having some carbohydrate in your diet. But it doesn't mean you need to have like 400 grams of carbohydrates for the day. It could even be like 150 grams of carbohydrates timed around your exercise, using a type of carbohydrate that agrees really well with your body, not some like inflammatory, crappy, like wheat carbohydrate, but something that like works really well for you, could be massively beneficial. So there's many ways that you can do it. And yes, your gut microbiome does have a play, like the types of foods that you eat. You're going to get different like flora that is good at breaking down those types of foods. My understanding of it is it's probably going to be best to have the most diversity possible. Like I do think the more you have just a straight meat carnivore diet, you do get the kind of gut bacteria that are putrefactive. Like they ferment amino acids because that's primarily what they're experiencing and seeing. And I think that you're going to get the best diversity if you still do include some fibers and you get different types of populations. So yeah, I'm like a don't necessarily need to eliminate all the carbohydrates. I think a lower carbohydrate diet is better for almost all people. But athletes would probably benefit from timing carbohydrates around their meals if they're in a high intensity sport.
Yeah, and the quality of your carbohydrates, if you're going to add them,
Yes.
that's important too. I always found it unusual when you would see like these ultra marathon runners like eating like, candy and like other. I'm like, isn't there? I mean, I guess you're just trying to you're burning it so quickly.
They're just trying to get fast sugar into the system immediately. So it's actually, there is, as crazy as that sounds, there is benefit. Like those goos that they eat, the endurance goos are literally just the equivalent of sugar, right? It's just glucose in a format, So yeah, I mean, they're just trying to eat while they're burning. So that's a really unique scenario, right? You're burning like 20,000 calories and you're running for like 150 miles nonstop. You're just like throw anything in the tank.
Yeah. That's interesting. But that's the thing about diet and health and nutrition is there's going to be some people who listen to the show and just like past shows of mine on these topics and they get a little overwhelmed. It's like, oh, so you're saying this work, I should eat like that. Like a lot of times people just want like a cut and dry answer, and it's like these things aren't always that simple. I'll have friends of mine who ask me for advice, and then they get so easily confused. They'll just be like, well, can I eat this? Can I not eat that? I'm like, and like we were saying before, like just try to simplify it as much as like slowly take baby steps into like just get rid of the processed foods, get rid of some. And then when you want to go to the next level and you want to, if you're exercising all the time and you want to take your performance to the next level, then I guess you can get to, that point where you start to figure out like, well, okay, should I include carbs? Should I not? Should I, but I think diet and nutrition, it's kind of benefited the health or the food industry and just the health world that we're in, that it's so confusing that a lot of people just throw their hands up and like, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to eat what I feel like eating, but
right.
It's which is it's not a good way of looking at it, and like I said, there are some basic rules that even if it is a little bit confusing, there's some basic rules you can implement today that's can slowly start improving just the wellness of yourself and your life. And I have a very somewhat similar experience in regards to cancer because my mother-in-law passed away around the same age of as your father, and I remember she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and then they said that she beat cancer, right? She was cancer free, and then it was a couple years later, out of nowhere, she didn't feel good. I think she drove herself to the hospital and didn't know that she was never going to leave the hospital again, and they found cancer everywhere. And that's one of the things that I always found the most disturbing was like, okay, so you're treating cancer with chemo and radiation, which can cause other types of cancer. And I've seen so many situations just in my personal life with my mother-in-law, but with other friends of mine who've had similar experiences where they treat cancer and then those treatments end up causing other types of cancer later down the line. And it's I remember just at a young age, just hearing these stories, I'm like, something doesn't make sense here. And I remember seeing my mother-in-law where they would put her through chemo and radiation, and she would get so weak that they would tell the family, us, that like say your goodbyes, like she's not, this is weak. She's too weak to go through any more chemo and radiation. And just basically finding a polite way of telling us like, hey, now's your opportunity to say goodbye. So they get her off the chemo and radiation, and magically, what would happen? She slowly start looking better and feeling better. And after a couple of days, she was looked like she was improving. And then what does the doctor say? Oh, look, she's healthy enough to go through chemo and radiation again. And the same thing happened a couple of times where I'm just like, I remember telling my wife, I'm like, listen, I know this isn't my place. I'm family, but I'm kind of, I'm your husband. I'm not, direct family, so I don't want to step on anybody's toes. But I'm like, I don't think the chemo radiation is helping, and I'm like, and honestly, I think it's gonna kill her before the cancer does. And which was hard for my wife to hear, and hard for me to say, but I couldn't just be a spectator and not
Yeah.
say something. And you know, with your own personal experience with cancer treatment, I mean, do you think that we're just treating it completely wrong? And what's your opinions on like just modern treatment for cancer?
Well, I do think it's pretty brutal in the sense that basically we're trying to do with with chemotherapy, we're basically introducing poisons in the body, poisons in the sense that they kill cells, they kill rapidly dividing cells, and the cancer cells themselves are so rapidly dividing that it kills those cells first. That's why we lose our hair when we do chemotherapy, because those are fast dividing cells, so those die. And it's like if you can kill all the fast dividing cells, then the body will eventually be able to recuperate and the cancer dies and all that. Like it's crazy that we don't have a better solution than that. Where we're just kind of like, oh, there's terrorists in the compound, in the there's terrorists in the village. Let's put poison in the water, and maybe they'll die first, and I mean it's a little more sophisticated than that. There's a lot of targeted chemotherapies that people have for different kinds of things, and then the radiation is basically like blasting those cells with stuff that kills them, like damaging things, which naturally damages all the surrounding areas. I mean, when it comes to cancer, like prevention is the best thing you can do. Two, nutritional intervention is massive because, as you did allude to earlier, we do know that cancer is a metabolic disease in the sense that there's dysfunction of the mitochondria, the energy producing cells, and the cancer cells end up just basically like they can only rely on fermenting sugar. So most cancers benefit from a lower sugar diet when you do have that, in like high nutrition, lower sugar. I don't know. I mean, it's tough to say that this whole industry that has helped some people but like hurt so many people is completely wrong. Like I know it's not going to be how we're treating cancer in like 30, 40, 50 years. Like we're not just going to be continuously like fast poisoning people and hoping that, they can live and survive. There's going to be a lot more targeted things with like cell therapies, doing stuff more like genetically targeting things, maybe using different platforms of new genetic therapies basically that might be really great for certain cancers. There's something interesting. There's a way of doing chemotherapy called insulin potentiated therapy, IPT, where basically because cancer cells are so hungry for sugar, they can attach the chemotherapy to basically insulin, a specific kind of insulin and sugar, so it targets those cancer cells more selectively versus like nuking the whole entire body. But again, like cancer happens when the body fundamentally gets damaged. Yes, there could be just like a straight genetic basis, but like our DNA gets damaged by all sorts of like environmental toxins. I mean, the sun itself, the radiation from the sun can damage the skin if it doesn't have the right protective mechanism. So if you can do everything in your power to, prevent damage and keep your immune system strong, you're going to be in great shape because your immune system is constantly fighting and cleaning up cancer cells. We have cells that are kind of like aberrantly, could be precancerous that the immune system like takes care of. We have natural killer cells that go around and just like nuke those guys. Now, if you're eating a crap diet, an inflammatory diet, your immune system's dysregulated, you're eating high sugar, you're overweight, your incidence and risk for this stuff goes up dramatically. So yeah, I mean, I saw it too. Like it sucks to see someone wither away from these treatments. I definitely don't think they're the best. I do have a hunch that we have a lot of things that are way better than chemotherapy that are not being like released or talked about or maybe even suppressed to a certain extent because there is an industry along this. And I think currently like what's available is a lot different than what we actually know at a very, very high level that people are doing in research settings and stuff like that. And I think when that can become commercially viable and the right players get the right things together, we'll see a change. But until then, we have a lot of sick people getting nuked with some poisons that are, work for some people, but not for a lot.
Yeah, I had a filmmaker years ago called Massimo. He's a talent filmmaker. He did a documentary called Cancer Cures, and he would document all these people who just like stories. They're like small little stories of like, okay, this was this doctor in this country that was curing people with this, and this was this another,
Mhm.
and like everyone ended the same way with like, them being demonized, funding disappearing,
Yep,
mysterious death,
for
all
sure.
things. And then I remember when I had Dr. Brzezinski on, he was one of like the first big doctors I had on in the first like 6 months of doing my podcast. And I just got, started doing podcasts. My audience was growing, little by little, but it wasn't big by any stretch. And I was really excited to have somebody that I respected so much on. And I remember when I had Dr. Brzezinski on, and prior to having him on, obviously I was a big fan of his, so I watched his documentary, and I remember seeing the part of the documentary where they would talk about how big pharma would actually have they hire people who monitor social media, and if anybody says anything about Dr. Brzezinski, they jump on it and start just circulating false information and rumors
Yeah.
about him and all this stuff. So I was excited that that I was going to have Dr. Brzezinski on. My show just took off, just launched, didn't have much of an audience. Figure I wouldn't be on Big Pharma's radar, right? Not yet. And I am now. I mean, I got kicked off YouTube during COVID, but that's another story. But I post, on Twitter and Facebook. I'm like, hey, I'm excited. I just booked Dr. Brzezinski. I'm excited to have him on. Boom, all these fake accounts just started attacking me. I remember at the time I had my buddy Dave Kornacki, who was my co-host, and I'm like, Dave, I'm like, I just started doing my podcast. Like, who are these people? I'm like, how? Like, I just posted something. I'm like,
Yeah.
in no time, I'm like, I'm getting people saying he's a murderer, he's a this, he's a that, and I'm just like, and I'm looking at their accounts. I'm like, these aren't real accounts. These can't be real accounts. Like, some of them were just created. Some of them had very little personal information. I'm just like, what is going on? And then, it hit me. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, this is the extent that they will go, that even a small podcaster like me at the time, I'm like, they were willing to like just like start spreading rumors and scare me into not having this guy on and contemplate having him on. Even my co-host was like, he's like, are you sure he's not pseudoscience? Like, there's a lot of people saying this. I'm like, Dave, I'm like, I'm glad you're skeptical. I'm like, I question him when he comes on. Let him answer. Like, hear the answers right from him and not from some,
Mhm.
campaign trying to demonize him. And so I mean, it was just an example of how cancer is big business.
That tells you a lot. And I'll also say this, what's really cool though, is like if something is truly based in truth, like it works, then it cannot ultimately be completely suppressed. Right. It can be an intention for people to like drown it out. And but like I think what we experienced on the backside of COVID in 2020 is a lot of people's minds opened up. They started looking at things more critically, thinking for themselves. And we maybe see the schism of those that did not, that just continue to look at like just like mainstream straight up narratives, but like the information will continue to get out there. There's a heart dewormer for dogs called fembendazole. I think that's what it's called, fembendazole, and like that now has applications for certain breast cancers, right? And that's like a very cheap, available drug that now is doing this kind of stuff. So there's a lot more options, and I do consider pharmaceutical companies, not all of them, not in all instances, because I think they do some degree of good work, but because it is industry, like I mean, it's kind of like a cartel. It's like the modern legalized cartel that is profiting on people, and obviously, it's an information war in a sense, and it's totally tied to social media and what people are allowed to think or see or believe to stick with like a mainstream narrative. And so as people begin to open their eyes and see and open their ears and listen to different sources of information and expand, we can see through this, and then people are going to take different paths and get different results and tell more people. So I think it's a matter of like pressures escaping from this lid, and like big pharma is trying to like keep pressure on it to keep it in for strictly for greed and profit, right? I mean, greed, profit, and control. And I don't think those are forces that are truly generative. Those are like parasitic forces that eventually run themselves out. They could take a long time for those to run themselves out, but it's not going to be a long-term suppression of every natural or more effective cancer treatment. It's just going to be a temporary one. Look what happened to smoking, right? Smoking was fine. And then finally, no one's like, oh shit, that was actually really bad for us. There's only so many years that could be kind of like suppressed before the narrative flips, so the narrative will eventually flip. That's the hope.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. You can only suppress the truth for so long, and
Yeah.
eventually, it does come out. But what a lot of people don't realize too is that what we call medicine today isn't what medicine was, many years ago. Food, um, teas, root extracts, these things were all what we consider medicines for a long, long time. When did it all change?
I think with like honestly, like in the late 1800s, when Bayer, the company, like started to like introduce aspirin in some of the early like pharmaceuticals and wanted to villainize a lot of the folk medicine. And then obviously the food and ag stuff came in too. And then we saw that explosion of modern diseases that kind of correlated with modern industry, eating far more grains, pesticide, hybridized things, actually the increase of electromagnetic fields. There's a really good book called Dirty Electricity, which you can kind of look into. And it's like non-native EMFs affect our health too, and correlate with mitochondrial dysfunction. So it's like modern society, I'd say the last couple hundred years is probably where this really started to heat up. And it's fascinating because we still revere like the civilization of like the ancient Greeks. We look at them, or like Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, Hippocrates. Like we still read their words of wisdom, and they're very relevant for our lives today. And we admire their civilization. Hippocrates, the father of what we consider modern medicine, said the doctor of the future will use the least medicine. And like, could we be further from the truth, right? Of that statement? Now we're trying to use basically the most medicine, because the incentives are all jacked up. People are metabolically unhealthy. They get a 15-minute visit with their doctor who gets reimbursed by insurance. So the best thing he or she can do is give them a statin, which, is the best way to lower their cholesterol in the short term, but doesn't address the root causes and creates more problems, weakness, and dependency. It's a complete system of how it's all massively interconnected. And the path out comes through sovereignty, comes through reclaiming your responsibility of your health, that this is not something that can be exported, and also under knowing that you got to have to make some serious lifestyle changes. And I know we've gotten into some specifics on nutrition today, but I'll just share this. Like, we've helped 100,000 people through Fit Father and Fit Mother inside our programs. And like, what we do is help walk people through this step-by-step experience of creating your unique nutrition plan, starting to move your body consistently, staying accountable, refreshing your mindset. Like, there is a process, and there's people like me and many others that actually have like a path to guide you through. But I think if you try to do this on your own, like most people, like unless you've been doing it for many, many years, like you, and it's ingrained into an identity, if you're struggling right now, there's a good chance that you're not going to be able to dig yourself out on your own. Like, it's really good to get support to be able to guide you through this, something you can kind of plug into to get away from these forces, and to establish your own deep roots. And when you have your own deep roots and you know what food makes you feel good, how to feed your family consistently, if you feel great about it, then you're on your own. You become the boss, and you're sovereign on your health, and then you can help your family and be a beacon of light for them. So there's a complete path out. It's rooted in truth and natural law and the stuff that our bodies need. It's just it's a process that someone needs to commit to, and I recommend people get help, honestly.
Without a doubt. And supplementation, are you a fan of it, or do you believe that most of our vitamins and minerals, and we should look at food first and only, or do you think there is a place for? I know obviously the supplement industry, even though I'm a fan of it, obviously there's a lot of crappy supplements out there, and a lot of people selling you snake oil. But what's your opinion on it?
I mean, there are so many wonderful supplements. I mean, like I'm a fan of supplements. I mean, I'm a fan of like the core basic supplements. So if I could recommend like the basic stuff for people, like people should be getting a vitamin D3 K2 supplement. Like, there's a reason why every white blood cell in your body, the stuff that helps with your anti-aging and your immune system, has a vitamin D receptor. It is so foundational. We're disconnected from the sun, the circadian rhythm. Stress burns through this. There's seasonal changes. People need to be taking D3K2 for immune system, brain health, hormonal health, and we're just not getting enough natural sunshine. And even if you were, it's still good to supplement. So that's one. Two, it's good for people to get a source of omega-3s. You can get this through cold water fatty fish, eating that a couple times a week, sardines, wild salmon, but it's honestly beneficial for people just to like supplement with that. It's good for your heart health. It's good for your brain health, for your cholesterol, your lipids, exercise recovery, fat burning. Like, omega-3s literally lodge into your cells, the outer phospholipid membrane of all your cells, and make them more fluid. Like it's really interesting. Like cholesterol, one of cholesterol's roles is to make things more rigid and give it structure. Omega-3's role in the outer phospholipid membrane is to make it more fluid so stuff can literally come into your cells. Imagine if you're not getting enough omega-3s and your cells actually can't transport stuff into them as much. You were literally unhealthy on a cellular level. So omega-3s help with that. That's great. People who have digestive issues can certainly benefit from taking some probiotics. You can get these for fermented foods, like as the sauerkraut, kimchi, probiotic yogurts of many different kinds if you tolerate those well. But it could also be beneficial for people to take probiotic supplements. I think that getting magnesium in your diet is a very important thing. It's this amazing mineral that helps keep us de-stressed. Magnesium's involved in over 300 different reactions that produce ATP. It's like a cofactor for all energy production. There's magnesium is depleted in our foods right now. Our soil is not as rich as it used to be from like the industrial farming practices and all that kind of stuff. So it can be beneficial to supplement. And a lot of the supplements that we recommend have magnesium in them, but you also can eat high magnesium foods, nuts, seeds, dark chocolate like cacao has a bunch of that in there. Certain like dark green leafy vegetables have magnesium, but certainly want to look into magnesium. And I think like it's also probably a good idea for someone to find some way to get their micronutrients like just generally covered. Like there's so many vitamins and minerals. These are the micronutrients that our body needs for high functioning. All the B vitamins, vitamin C, let alone all the minerals that we need, not just like the sodium and chloride that we get as like salt, but all these like more micro minerals that we need for high functioning. Like it's good if you can get kind of like a catch-all supplement that just gives you a good insurance policy that you're getting those throughout the day. That could look like a multivitamin. It could look like some kind of powder, like a greens powder, multi-mineral. What we do is we include, we have a supplement that we formulated for our fit fathers and fit mothers where we include basically like a low dose multivitamin, meaning just like roughly like 100 or so percent of most of the stuff inside of a really delicious protein powder called Super Fuel that we have. And then we also throw in probiotics, enzymes, some superfoods and stuff like that. So it's just a routine. Someone can take a scoop of that a day, but point being is I think it's good to have a multivitamin, multimineral, vitamin D3, K2, omega-3, magnesium. And it could be beneficial if someone wants to, as someone gets older, to take some kind of natural anti-inflammatory, like a curcumin, like a turmeric. Curcumin is very good from anti-cancer, exercise recovery, brain health is very good. And you can go down the rabbit hole. There's far more supplements than that are massively beneficial for very specific cases. But I think I want people to really think about it is, are you getting your foundations met? Omega-3s, D3K2, low dose multi, probiotic if needed, and certainly some magnesium. That's where I'd recommend people start.
Yeah, I was just showing it's a can of Remedy kombucha. It's one of the kombuchas I drink from time to time. It's one of the only sugar-free ones you can find.
Nice.
They let it ferment all the sugar out. So it's pretty good alternative if you're doing a low carb, low sugar diet.
There you go.
So we're roughly the same age. You work with a lot of older parents and help them kind of optimize their body and minds. What do you think about like testosterone and hormone levels? Do you subscribe to any of the supplements or like a lot of herbs now that are getting popular that obviously we know exercise and diet can help with hormone levels, but is there any supplements that you find work or you think you would recommend?
For sure. And I think when we get into the realm of hormones, like they're like the chemical messengers that give us the experience of vitality. Like they cause all the different transcription factors to happen in the nucleus of our cells that leads to different protein expression and like it helps us build things up and have the youthful skin, muscles, energy, libido, all these things. I think it's good to get blood work and work with your doctor to see where your levels exactly are, because it's something that you want to have some more visibility on. I do think that there are a number of supplements that are very helpful. DHEA is available in the United States as an over-the-counter. It's actually a hormone, dihydroepiandrosterone. It's a precursor to all the sex hormones. So for men, DHEA is precursor to testosterone. For women, it can also be converted to different kind of estrogens and progesterone and some of that. So what's really interesting is like DHEA levels by the time you're 50 are roughly around 15% what they were when you were 20. And DHEA is produced, in the adrenal glands as well. And so stress can be something that, damages that. So that could be something people look into. For men, making sure you're getting the precursors to testosterone, zinc and magnesium are quite important. Boron is another mineral that is important for that. A good herb for men is ashwagandha, is another great herb that has some testosterone raising effects and certainly lowers cortisol. So for guys, testosterone is being bombarded on many ways. Like stress levels are tanking guys' testosterone levels. Environmental chemicals and estrogens and plastics are tanking guys' testosterone levels. Too many stimulants, not enough sleep. Like cortisol, the stress hormone, and testosterone have a seesaw relationship. Like if you want to tank your testosterone levels, like drink a lot of coffee, don't sleep a lot, be very stressed, don't exercise, don't eat enough good quality nutrition. It's not surprising why so many guys are tanked. Now, the path of going on TRT and actually replacing is an option. But it should be viewed as like a longer term solution. And I think it should be done as something that you've exhausted the natural options first, because otherwise, you're really taking external hormones, shutting down your own internal production, relying on a shot, a pill, a cream, or whatever route that you choose to do that, or pellet. And that's kind of like your external production for a long period of time. But if you can address the root cause and delay that decision for as long as possible, that's what I typically recommend. And for women, there are also a lot of great things that you can do, and it depends on your age, what point you are on in menopause, premenopause, postmenopause. There's like a lot of wonderful herbs that women have been using for thousands and thousands of years to regulate estrogen and progesterone levels. Postmenopausal, it can be very good for people to get things like maca or certain phytoestrogens that are found in certain plant-based compounds. And it comes down to like, I can't make blanket recommendations because someone needs to know their family history, risks of certain things, like cancer is a good consideration because like a lot of these cancers are certainly with women are tied to different estrogens and progesterone. And you want to make sure that it's safe for some people to take these things. But I think there's a lot of ladies that end up doing hormone replacement therapy in their peri and postmenopause, and they feel fantastic. So there's certainly benefit to that. But I guess if you don't have the foundations checked, where you're doing the exercise, nutrition, sleep on a consistent basis, taking some of the basic supplements, which by the way, on Fit Mother Project and Fit Father Project, if you go to our websites, like we have formulations for men's testosterone and women's hormone support around menopause. Like I formulated the best herbs, vitamins, minerals into those that I think are best. So for women, it's called Balance. For guys, it's Test Booster RX. So not saying you need to use our supplements, but like there's people like me out there that have formulated good things if you do want to try something. But yeah, HRT can be life-changing, but it's not a decision to make lightly.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think a lot of people jump to the TRT, because it's easy, right? You go there,
Yeah.
you don't have to do any of your own individual work of, really making sure you get quality sleep, making sure your diet's on point, making sure, mentally and physically you're not overstressed or overworking out, all these other things that can lower your testosterone. But yeah, I mean, and so I think that, yeah, definitely do those things first. Then as a last resort, when you think you've exhausted everything else.
Yep.
I'm assuming you're a fan of like creatine, any performance, for people who are out there who are, high intensity athletes, any recommendations on?
Yeah. Okay. So creatine monohydrate is a supplement that anyone interested in not just athletics, but just like health and longevity should be taking. This interesting studies show that you actually give elderly people, we'll say people over 65, creatine monohydrate, even if they don't exercise. It helps improve their cognitive function and improves their muscle mass. So like creatine is amazing because like we mentioned back in those energy pathways, the creatine phosphate pathway, when you give your body more creatine, you have more creatine stores. So you can like basically perform better in the short burst duration activities. Like weightlifting is one of those. A set often takes like 60 seconds when you're strength training. So you're using creatine phosphate pathway. Good for brain health, good for muscle building, safe to use long term, 3 to 5 grams once a day, basically at any time you want. You don't need to cycle it. So that's certainly a really good supplement.
Incredibly cheap.
Yeah, right. Just creatine powder is like so accessible. It's like, and it's helpful in far more ways than just muscular, power and strength. Although it does directly act on pathways, this mTOR pathway, and causes muscle building. So that's pretty awesome. I think there's this whole world of like blood flow and nitric oxide enhancing supplements, and there are a lot of like good benefits to certain supplements, like people taking things like citrulline, people taking like some of these nitric oxide lozenges that have some nitrate in them that give your body the precursor to make nitric oxide. Like nitric oxide is one of the most important gases in the body. It's a nitrogen oxygen together, and our vessels use it as a vasodilation and cell signaling molecule that is so important. And as we age, one thing that we see with heart disease that eventually manifests as peripheral artery disease, where people have like, less circulation, numbness and tingling, let alone with high cholesterols and high triglycerides and thick blood, is nitric oxide levels are also really low as we age. This is why men experience, it's not the only cause of it by any means, but erectile dysfunction, and women have loss of vaginal lubrication. A lot of this is driven by decreasing NO levels. So stuff you can do to increase nitric oxide is good. This is a pharmaceutical. It's not an over the counter, but people are going to start taking it a lot more for performance. But it's basically Cialis. The drug that Cialis is, it's a medication that guys take for erections. It's called tadalafil is the actual name. It's like a long sustained release version of Viagra. Cialis, if someone's taking for erectile dysfunction, they may take like 50 milligrams, but if you take only 5 milligrams a day, it just gives enough of a boost to your nitric oxide. So I think you're going to see a lot more athletes, and I know a lot of CrossFit people are already doing it, taking low dose Viagra, but technically Cialis at like 5 milligrams, because it increases your nitric oxide levels pretty substantially without giving you, the erection effects. So stuff to increase nitric oxide is very good. A quality protein powder, not necessary by any means, but can be helpful to hit your targets of things. Yeah, and I think the other realm with like these functional mushroom supplements are very powerful now. I think lion's mane is a good one for cognitive health as we age, but certainly some of the immune boosting mushrooms are also very good. We're going to see a lot more supplements like there. Mushrooms are powerful, powerful compounds, so those are also good to explore.
Yeah, I use Shroom Tech Sport from time to time for when I'm playing basketball or soccer if I want a little bit more just endurance. And it seems to work, and it helps a lot. Like mushrooms, like you said. And what about the peptides? Have you dived into any of these, or even some of the Turkerstone, or however you pronounce it?
Yeah, turkesterone, like that's I've not personally taken that, but these things do work. They're basically like they do bind to androgen receptors, and they do help increase anabolism. That's different than peptides. So turkesterone, I think, it's a natural compound. I believe it's actually found in quinoa at high amounts, and also some maybe even in some insects. But basically, it's kind of acts like a steroid would, but it's a natural compound, and it's not hormonal technically, but it does bind and cause an increase in protein synthesis, which is effectively what muscle building is. Peptides. So this is a whole world of different things that now we can take orally or inject. And they're like, what a peptide is basically like a small sequence of amino acids. So it's not the same as like you took like a branch chain amino acid powder. It's like a string of those. So it's not quite a full blown protein, but it's a string of amino acids. It's basically just defining the length of the molecule. And they do many things. Like our body uses peptides for all sorts of different things. And then we can take them, and we find that many of them have biological effects. I think there are some interesting peptides that people are taking for growth hormone increases. There are peptides that people are now using for weight loss, like Ozempic and stuff like this. These are analogs of a something called GLP-1 that can lead to having higher satiety. I have played around with personally, like using healing peptides like BPC 157 or TB 500. If you have injuries, I think peptides are something to really look into, because they're safe. They can absolutely speed up healing. It's just a whole wide world of this, and there's a lot of benefit. Like I think people could use them, but again, I think it's foundational, right? I want to get back to the idea if you don't have the house of the foundation of good nutrition and like good habits and regular strength training, like peptides are in the optimization realm, and I will give it a thumbs up. It's a wide world. You want to make sure you're getting good source of these things and like really do your own research. But yeah, there's a lot of benefit to them.
Yeah. I think 157 is they're demonizing it now. I've heard Rogan and others talk about how it seems like anytime something works, they try to demonize. I remember having Chris Bell on the show back in the, and when he was promoting Kratom and that whole demonization of Kratom, and it just seems like it's so obvious that anytime something natural, a natural remedy, a natural alternative to mainstream medicine comes about and the popularity increases, they quickly demonize it, and all of a sudden you start seeing all these stories of people overdosing on it and all this stuff. It's like the time.
BPC 157 is so safe. You can take it orally or inject it. It is, your body makes it naturally. Unlike taking Advils or NSAIDs or stuff like this, which actually just squash inflammation, BPC increases healing, and you can take it orally. It also works orally. So it's like literally whatever anyone says against that one, they're they're full of shit and just trying to maintain this like this very tight, backwards facing mainstream medicine narrative. And unfortunately for them, BPC works. It's the truth. They can try to ban it, but it's safe and people can use it to heal.
One thing I always try to do on the show is hope that somebody learned something. And if you didn't learn anything, you weren't listening, because I'm pretty sure I took quite a few notes myself. And so I can't, I've taken up so much of your time, and I know you're a busy man, and I don't want to take up any more. But can you tell people who are listening how they can keep up with your work, how they can connect with you if they're more interested in your Fit Mother, Fit Father projects and all this stuff, like how to connect with you?
For sure. Well, I just first want to say this was a pleasure. I had a really good time, Ricky. Thanks for having me on, and we covered a lot of ground. And so again, what I said in the beginning when you asked me about origin story is like I help people primarily over 40, but like we have hundreds, if not thousands, of members in their 30s and even 20s who use our programs. Like I help people create a health routine that's rock solid, sustainable, clears out a lot of the misinformation, and basically gives you the plan that lays behind the conversation we had today. And if someone's interested in seeing our men's program, you can go to fitfatherproject.com, and you'll see the website, the programs, some of the supplements I mentioned. That's all there. Our women's program is fitmotherproject.com. And if you go on those websites, like whether or not you're ready to like go join a program and go deep with us, but if you do, like it's amazing. We get you set up in our app. You have all the meal plans, all the recipes, all the workouts, access to our community, myself directly. We're all like in there. It's awesome. But you can also join our mailing list on the website. We'll give you a free meal plan and workout so you can at least get a taste of what we're up to. And if you like YouTube, like go on YouTube. I think between the two channels, we have over 1 million subscribers. And people subscribe because we have lots of good stuff, like over 600-700 videos, lots of good topics. So head over to YouTube too if you want to like get deeper into what I'm up to and listen to videos I have on almost all topics imaginable. It's on there. So YouTube and the websites fitfatherproject.com and fitmotherproject.com.
Awesome. I'll put all those links in the show description. Thank you so much for your time. I think the work that you're doing is so important. There's nothing more important than optimizing your body, your mind, and the life that we live, because we only have limited amount of time. So trying to get the most out of it is definitely super important. And I can't thank you enough for your time. Hopefully we talk again in the near future. I'll send you links to the show once it's up and live. And if there is anything that you want me to put in the show description, feel free to email me it and send it to me, and I'll make sure to put it there. And like I said, thanks again. You're doing amazing work. I know people are gonna love this episode and definitely take something from it. Hopefully they implement it immediately, some of this advice you've given, so they can start getting the most out of their lives. And thanks again. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ricky. I appreciate it too.
Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. We'll keep in touch.